We will start off here from the beautiful Dave Campbell Studios with a look into some Texas high school football fun facts. So I think I know what order these are in, but if I'm on the wrong one, let me know.
I got you. That's my job as the producer.
It is
to listen to you and to
true.
go off of what you say, and then I make what you say happen.
This all checks out. Without further ado, Texas high school football fun facts. So starting off with our first one here, Mr. Jewel Wallace. So he is the only UIL coach to win a state championship both in basketball and in football.
Sheesh.
That's insane because honestly, like at least from a head coaching perspective, that would not happen.
No.
Anymore. You're not going to have a school that the head football coach and the head basketball coach
are the
is
same person. Well, you just don't have time.
No.
I mean, well, and especially you have to think about it in a way that the two seasons overlap.
Mm-hmm.
You know, basketball starts really early. I mean, there's some invitationals that start in October, and that's even before the Texas high school football playoffs even start. So there's already a big overlap, and then it just takes up so much time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, if you're coaching both, you're realistically starting from, gosh, if you want to go way back into like spring ball, you know, all the way until the end of basketball season, which is March. I mean, well, you have a month off, maybe even that. Like, there's just no way.
No, there's really not, because a state, especially on a state championship run,
right?
Like you're literally getting into district play by the time that the state championships are being played. Like, right. I mean, you might have the week in between Christmas without district games, but a lot of people are starting it. But the crazy thing is Mr. Jewel Wallace did it at, he won a basketball state championship at El Paso High School in 1941. Then he moved out to San Angelo, and in 1943 won the football state championship, and then went to a third school, San Antonio Jefferson, and won a football state championship there. So all across the state. But the thing that's like really just shows that there's no way that this would happen nowadays is the fact that like all of these, at the time 6A wasn't a thing, but these were schools being played at the highest level. I mean, we're talking like
exactly
5A. All of those teams, maybe not Jefferson, but all of those teams are, you know, high up in enrollment.
That's a good point, because I bet you there are a couple of 1A programs across the state, maybe even 2A, but that have the same head coach in football and basketball, who's probably also the AD, you know, like at the 1A level. But yeah, that's a great point. I mean, pointing out that that's at the highest level. That's
right.
Tough.
Yeah, and I would think that there would be a lot of 1A schools that they were at least assistant coaches, or like a lot of coaches are the head basketball coach and then they're the golf coach, or the head football coach, and then maybe usually football's pretty steady, but even at a smaller school, maybe they're the head track coach or the tennis coach or something like that, but never football and basketball.
No.
So there's your first Texas high school football fun fact. Moving on now to our second fun fact, family matters. These are families with multiple state champion winning coaches that are in the families. So the first of which, the first family to do it, and actually it happened in the same year. Well, no, that's a lie. Hang on. So the first one, dating back to the oldest, would be the York family.
Yes.
So father, Chuck York, he won a state championship in Brady in 1959. He was then followed by his first son, Toby, who won it as the Cameron head coach in 1981. And then his second son, Todd, won at Corrigan Camden in 2002. Technically, the first ones to actually accomplish this feat just a year prior were the Keelings. That was Jimmy Keeling, won in Lubbock Estacado in 1968, and then his son Dale Keeling won at the alma mater of our very own Matt Stepp in Everman, the Bulldogs. Woo, woo, woo. 2001 and 2002. He went back-to-back in those Everman state championships. I know that Stepp remembers those quite well. And then it was funny because the website that I'm pulling off this information off of, which shout out to our great friends at TexasHighSchoolFootballHistory.com, they actually hadn't updated this because just this year we had the third family to ever have a father-son duo. And again, these are at the coaches level. There have been other families that have had, for instance, like John King. He coached his son
in a
and they won a state championship. So you have player-dad relationships a lot, but you very obviously rarely have dad-son go to be state championship winning coaches.
Right.
But the Josephs, Gary Joseph has won his 5 state titles with the Katy Tigers, and then his son Jeff, Port Neches Groves, beating Sauk to claim their first state title in program history. So recently added, this year the Josephs get added to that. So Family Matters, those are 3 families that have state championship winning coaches in father-son combos.
Well, and it's obviously amazing that the Keelings and the Josephs did it as a father-son duo, right? But if you talk about the Yorks, I mean, so first you have the father who did it, Chuck, and then you've got the son, Toby, who did it. So I was reading an article about that family earlier, and it talked about how Todd, the second son that won a state championship at Corrigan Camden back in 2002, he had seen that his father and his brother had done it. And so that's when he got into coaching, and he was like, dude, I want to do the same thing.
That's insane.
And then he did it.
So he wasn't even in coaching before.
I don't believe so. Yeah, I don't believe
that?
so. Yeah, it was really, really fascinating because you can see that's a big break from 1981 to 2002, like that 20-year break in between. But I thought that was really, really cool that he was like, hey, I want to do that too. And sure enough, he went and did the thing.
Yeah, that's wild. It's like, oh yeah, you know what? This will be easy. Let's just keep the train going of state championships.
Right,
so, yeah, I mean, a huge gap too there between 1959 and 2002. So really, really, really cool. Just, I can't even imagine what it's like to share that. And I always imagine that specifically for the wife of the father, that has to be so cool to be like, I've watched my husband go win a state championship. I've watched him likely coach my sons and get to go through all of that, which can be very cool and very stressful at the same time. We've talked to plenty of coaches' wives that have said that. But on the other side of that, to then go, then I get to watch my son win a state championship. Like we always talk about Elizabeth Dodge.
I was just about to say that.
Not only did she, and they talk about another family
coming
that
up there,
is budding on this list. If Riley Dodge can get it done, like they're the next ones that are going to be up on that pedestal. But what's funny and prevented that from happening was the fact that he had to play his dad in the state championship game,
which is so crazy. But no, I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple year or two we saw them up there as well.
Yeah. Yep. Moving on now to our third Texas high school football fun fact. How about decades of dominance? Coaches to win state championships in 4 separate decades. So let's just put that into perspective. 4 separate decades. The minimum amount of time that you would have to coach realistically to be able to accomplish that feat is what, like 30 years, 31 years? Because technically you could hit like 1999 and then somewhere in the 10s, somewhere in the like that kind of stuff. Like you could get the last and then the first of the other part of the decade, but still that's a long time spent coaching.
That's insane.
Especially a long time spent as a head coach.
Also at the same school in terms of Tim Buchanan, right? I mean, that's insane.
Yeah, so the 3, and these are all names that are synonymous with success and dominance in Texas high school football. The first of which being arguably the greatest coach of all time, and Gordon Wood. So he won 2 championships at Stanford, 55 and 56. So there's your first decade in the 50s. And then he went on to coach at Brownwood. That's where the legend was made, Gordon Wood Stadium, the naming rights are after him. He's plastered all over that. I mean, just a staple of Texas high school football history. He won in 60, 65, and 69. So there's your second decade. Then he won in 70 and 78. So there's your third decade. And then he capped it off with one more in 81 out of his total 8 state championships. So I mean, just crazy. An unbelievable feat to accomplish, not only winning one in 55 and winning another one in 81, like just think about how crazy that is. But then, you sprinkle in 6 more in between those two. Truly miraculous what he was able to do. The next of which being G.A. Moore in Salina, which you've got to remember, he coached at Salina for a little bit, left for Pilot Point, and then came back and had the long historic run in Salina. So hang with me here, because he won his first state championship in Salina in 74. He then left, went to Pilot Point, and won in 80 and 81. After that, he left, went back to Salina, so there's 2 decades right there. Back to Salina in his 3rd decade to win in 95, 98, 99, and then here comes the next one, 2000 and 2001. So already you have 4 state championships in a row.
Consecutive.
And 4 decades to total 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 state championships.
That's absurd.
Wild.
Absurd.
And then this was the one that almost actually took me by surprise a little bit, because Tim Buchanan has been such a recent phenomenon. Like Gordon Wood and G.A. Moore, yeah, that's great, but both of their last state championships were in the early aughts. I mean, you were 3 the last time that they won a state championship. To have someone right now who just retired this past year be such a dominant force, 4 decades for Tim Buchanan at Aledo. You've got his first one in 98, large gap, 09, 10, 11, 13, 19, 20, 22. I mean, the historic run that Aledo has been on since he took over in 98, and even before that a little bit with Coach Woods, just insane. Well, I mean, insane.
Well, and what makes Tim Buchanan's, I guess, this much more impressive too is that he's 8-0 in state championships. So it's not like he went to a state championship during that time and lost. Like, he won every single state championship that he was able to get to, which is even more impressive to me.
Just wild. And Aledo, of course, being the Texas high school football program with the most state championships in history, because not to mention those couple of other years that are not mentioned in Tim Buchanan's Aledo run that they won state championships in, it was when Tim Buchanan was the AD and Steve Wood was the head coach, because they pulled a little switcheroo on you, continued to win championships, and then Tim Buchanan came back to win a few more just to cap off what was an incredible career. So decades of dominance, those 3, Gordon Wood, G.A. Moore, and Tim Buchanan being the 3 coaches to win state championships in 4 separate decades. A wild, wild stat. And last but certainly not least, let's talk about some of the best program builders. So we just talked about guys that went out there and for decades won a ton of state championships. Some of them, like Tim Buchanan, stayed at one school and were able to pull off all of those state championships. Well, these program builders, the reason I'm calling them program builders are because these are the coaches, the 3 coaches to win state championships at 3 different schools. Okay, say what you will about build it and they'll come. I genuinely believe Aledo is an example of that. Of you have built such a successful program, people want to move there and play football at Aledo. Makes sense. These guys were able to take rubbish and turn it into gold. 3 different schools they can secure a state championship out. So we start off, let's go in the way back machine, which this photo of Pete Shotwell is just amazing in his like old school.
That's so great.
Like, that's like letter jackets used to be that. Like, it used to be a sweater. It wasn't like what we have now with all the patches and all that stuff, but an Abilene sweater vest there for Pete Shotwell. If you're not watching it live, you need to go back and check out this photo because it's awesome. But in 1923, secured a state championship with Abilene. In 1929, then went to Breckenridge and got one. And then in 1937, how about that? Won it with the Longview Lobos, which I believe was the last state championship that the Lobos had until John King and Haynes King were able to do it in 2018, which is why it was such a, oh my gosh, for the first time in however many years, the Lobos are back.
Right.
Then Terry Cron was the next one to do it. In 1992, he was the head coach at Bartlett, which actually at the time, get this, was a 1A school, but it wasn't 6-man football. 6-man used to be its own private sector. 1A was just the smallest 11-man classification, which is basically how when then they switched it to 6A, it basically kept the staying the same. They just moved up six-man. He then went to a 2A school and won it in Mart in 1999, and then over to Commerce in 2001. And the most recent one to do it, Vance Jones.
We got to be a little bit a part of this history.
We sure did. In 1976, he won at Marathon. In 09 and 10, he won at Garden City. And then in 2020, he goes to Balmorhea and he locks down that wild state championship game that was played at Shotwell Stadium in Abilene, because if you remember, they actually had to cancel that game because there was a COVID outbreak, and that was the only game that was not played at AT&T Stadium in 2020 throughout all of COVID. Oh my gosh,
you're right.
Yeah, because we split up and we had the 1A through 4A state championships in December when they usually were, because 1A through 4A, since it was able to social distance a lot more and all of that jazz, they were able to keep a normal schedule.
Right.
With 5A and 6A having so many students and not being able to start on the right time, they were 4 weeks delayed. So we had the 5 and 6A state championships, those 4 state championship games in January.
Yes.
But we actually, out of the, what would that be, 4 classifications times 2, so out of the 8 games that we were supposed to have, we actually only had 7 games played that week. And then 2 weeks later, Balmorhea and oh gosh, who was it? I can't remember who the other team was, but they played, in Abilene.
It wasn't Garden City, was it? No.
I don't know. All I remember, the biggest thing that I remember from that game, one, was sitting on my living room floor, cutting highlights of the game, and us fully deploying like our state championship coverage from like my living room floor with like mask on, you know?
I remember that. It seems like such a long time ago.
Such a long time ago. But the main thing that I took,
was Rankin.
Rankin.
That's what it
the
was.
Red Devils.
Rankin. Mm-hmm.
The main thing that I remember from that game is the unbelievable call by Craig Way. Balmorhea had the player that was called the Diesel, and he broke away for like, oh God, probably 4 or 5 touchdowns that night, but one of them, big old boy was hustling down the sideline, and Craig Way goes, and here comes the Diesel, whoa, whoa, like made a
I hope you cut that.
Noise.
I really hope you cut that.
It was the most incredible call I've heard ever in my, like, forget the Vince Young national championship call that Craig Way had. What I'll always remember is the Diesel
1A
call.
championship. That's so good.
So anyway, those 3 coaches have been the 3 coaches to win a state championship game at 3 different schools. What a career and what a program building, just dynasty that is. So there you go.
Well, you know who might be on track to be on this list as well?
Todd Dodge.
Because he did it at South Lake Carroll. And then he did it, obviously, at Austin Westlake. And now he's at Lovejoy. And he's inheriting a really talented squad. Yep. So,
you're not wrong. The Dodgers have a chance to really break into some, like, incredible history.
Right.
If Riley can win a state championship, they'll enter into that father-son combo of getting the Family Matters done with. And then, he would join, be the 4th person to win a state championship at 3 different schools.
programs. Yeah.
That's wild. All right, no pressure, Dodgers. Like,
no
have fun.
pressure there.
So there you go. Some Texas high school football fun facts. We thought that was fun. I don't know. I like it.
That was
great.
That was really, really great. That was interesting, too.